I'm Joe Arnold, president of the Louisville Forum, and welcome to our January 2023 meeting. Founded in 1984, the Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group that hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect our greater Louisville community. On occasion, such as today, we do invite solo speakers to address significant issues. For more information on the Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Today's program, Planes, Drones, and Automobiles, Our Transportation Future. As we begin this year, transportation looms especially large. Planes. Well, within the last month, most of us know about two major air travel issues led by Southwest Airlines, canceling more than 16,000 flights in late December. Just last week, an FAA pilot alert system failed, prompting a full ground stop on all departures. Drones. Walmart and now Amazon have begun delivering small packages using drones at pilot sites such as in Texas and California. My question, coming up, is the future now for drones and other autonomous vehicles? Automobiles. The Biden administration is all in with hundreds of billions of dollars to incentivize a transition to EVs. Is the U.S. ready? We are honored today to welcome former U.S. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, a highly experienced leader of large, complex organizations in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, as well as a veteran in strategic management and oversight, crisis management and communications, and government regulatory oversight. She has been confirmed to 2 cabinet positions by the U.S. Senate on a strong bipartisan basis. Secretary Chao, in fact, is the first Asian Pacific American woman to serve in a president's cabinet in American history. She is the longest-serving cabinet secretary since World War II. At the U.S. Department of Transportation, which includes the Federal Aviation Administration, Secretary Chao focused on keeping America's transportation system safe and efficient, investing over $300 billion in infrastructure over 3.5 years, and engaging with new technologies to build the transportation system of the future. During the COVID-19 health crisis, Secretary Chao's decisive actions kept America's transportation networks safe and moving. As U.S. Secretary of Labor, Secretary Chao focused on increasing the competitiveness of the workforce in a global economy. She set new records for workplace safety and health while reducing the annual budget by 9% through more effective cost control and better management practices. Prior to becoming Labor Secretary, Elaine was president and CEO of United Way, where she restored, you might recall, public trust after the organization had been tarnished by previous financial mismanagement and abuse. Elaine Chao also served as head of the Peace Corps, where she launched programs in the newly liberated Baltic nations and former Soviet Union, including Ukraine. In the private sector, Elaine was vice president of syndications and established the West Coast syndications unit within Bank of America and Citicorp. She's been a director and trustee on numerous public boards and nonprofit boards. Her personal story is extraordinary. Born in Asia, she immigrated to America at the age of 8, not speaking English, and she received her citizenship at age 19, earning her undergraduate degree in economics from Mount Holyoke College, her MBA from Harvard Business School, the recipient of 37 honorary degrees. Again, I am so honored and pleased to welcome her to our Louisville Forum. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Elaine Chao. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, for that overly generous introduction. It's great to be back home and wonderful to see all of you. You know, when I was invited, I was going to talk about the future of transportation. Little did I know that transportation was going to be at the top of the news lately, as Joe mentioned, supply chain delays, airline cancellations, and even a full FAA shutdown. These are problems that need to be studied and solved. But let me say also, when I was Secretary of Transportation, I had 3 goals. Number 1 is that safety must always be number 1. We want people to be able to leave their homes and return home safely. Second, I wanted to make sure that we invested in the transportation infrastructure of our country. So indeed, we invested over $330 billion to ensure the efficiency, the economic vibrancy, and the enhanced quality of life that we all expect. And then thirdly, my goal was to build the foundation for the transportation of the system of the future. And to that end, I was going to talk about innovation, changes in technology, and the future of transportation innovation in America. So we're going to discuss current events in the Q&A, but I hope you'll indulge me if you let me talk about the transportation system of the future and the innovation that you will see in your lifetime. So let me touch upon the emerging technologies that will change the way that we work, live, and travel in the future. We're going to see supersonic flights, commercial space tourism, drones, flying taxis, and autonomous vehicles. The pandemic, which is now in year 3, has intensified the changes that were already taking place before COVID was a household word. People were already ordering more online, conducting more business and social interactions virtually, and also choosing more mobility options such as Uber and Lyft and electric scooters. Now, COVID has changed how goods get transported as trips change from personal to commercial. And the more online purchases, the more needed are the US Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, and others. So in terms of automated vehicles, let me say, car crashes have been rising since the pandemic, and they haven't stopped. Almost 43,000 people died in car crashes in America in 2021. This is about 13% more than the 38,000 in 2020. And the 2020 number was 5% higher than the 36,000 deaths in 2019. So the trend line is not good. Now, research shows that 94% of serious crashes and fatalities are due to human error. So advanced driver assistance systems, automated driving systems can significantly reduce deaths, fatalities, and injuries. So from 2017 to 2020, the Department of Transportation released a Vision for Safety 2.0, and is to promote improvements in safety, mobility, and productivity of all these automated driving systems. And we made it also possible for the driver to be defined as an automated driving system, thereby promoting the innovation that is necessary for automated vehicles while protecting safety. And then there was Autonomous Vehicles 3.0, which then went to trains, railroads, ships. And then we also had Automated Vehicles 4.0, which ensured American leadership in automated vehicle technologies by galvanizing and harnessing all the power of the federal government in conjunction with the private sector. But there are 38 different federal agencies, so we wanted to make sure that they were all speaking with a rightful one voice. So automated technologies, vehicles, technologies, will give older Americans and people with disabilities their freedom back. And it's going to dramatically increase their quality of life. And then automated vehicles can also help on the commercial side. The recent supply chain problems reflect the tremendous shortage of truck drivers. There are about 80 to 100,000 truck drivers needed currently. So technology can help to augment the shortage of truck drivers. And trucks use cameras, radar, LiDAR to see the road, and there's advanced computing that simulates 1,200 scenarios each second to predict what other vehicles are going to be doing and determine the safest way to drive. So this technology is going to transform the safety and efficiency of trucking, freight trucking, for example. Currently, a 600-mile route takes a human driver about 22 hours to complete. And an autonomous vehicle can do the same trip in only about 12 hours because it doesn't have to have the federally mandated 10-hour rest break for human beings. And as for the human input, this technology is going to improve the quality of life for for truckers because most people don't like these long drives. They take people away from homes for long stretches at a time. So drones, and I'm going to make this quick because I know you've got questions. Drones used to be the province of the military, but now anybody can buy a drone for like $500. And a whole new category of workers have now been developed, and they're called drone operators. So the increased momentum for e-commerce demands greater innovation in last mile delivery. Drones can now carry packages the last mile. And as mentioned, Amazon has started delivering packages, and UPS as well. And packages are they're less than 5 pounds now, and they're dropped from about 9 feet high. And we're seeing drones being used in commercial aspects, like in aerial photography, emergency management, precision agriculture, infrastructure inspections and monitorings like power plants or miles of railroad tracks. And if there's ever a catastrophe, a hurricane, we can send drones in after the fact to determine what repairs are needed. Now, some people are concerned about drones and the privacy issues and the noise and security, and that's why regulators have to be concerned to address legitimate public concerns about safety, security, and privacy. And we, in 2020, while in office, required that each drone would have an ID so that we can determine how to track these drones. And then supersonic is coming back as well. And we've also done a great deal to ensure that America is now once again #1 in commercial space. FAA now licenses over 30 space operations. There are about 135 successful space launches in 2021 and 176 successful space launches in 2022. And when space tourism begins, that number is going to rise. And we're going to drive the whole value of this new space economy to about $1 trillion by 2040. So Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, SpaceX, they have each flown their tourist-focused missions. Now, they've so far just sent billionaires. But in the future, spaceflight will no longer just be the purview of billionaires. Commercial travel between New York City and Sydney, Australia, for example, via commercial space vehicles can possibly be a fraction of the current duration of 20 hours. So American innovation has powered this growth, including reusable rockets, air launch systems, and other technologies that are reducing the cost of space flight. The US is once again #1 in terms of commercial space after having fallen to 6 or 7 in 2016 and earlier. These new technologies will transform the way in which we move and work. You know, we live in a wonderful country where there's peace and stability, where dreams can come true, and our potential, our actualization of our potential is viewed as our birthright. Transportation is a vital connector that enables our mobility, productivity, and quality of life. Innovation is America's hallmark. It is a part of who we are as Americans, and it is among our premier export to the rest of the world. So thank you so much for letting me share with you a glimpse of the future, and I'm glad to talk about whatever you want to talk about in transportation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know we have many questions, and Iris Wilberg-Lick, as our vice president, she'll be in the back there to ask some of them. I have a couple to start with, though, Secretary, and I mentioned in my opening remarks, I'm going to put you right on the spot. What can and should be done about the recent flight delays and cancellations, and is there reform beyond just fixing software?
You know, I think the airlines know how they need to be trusted by the flying public. During the COVID, they had to significantly downsize. The federal government gave them about $25 billion through the Treasury Department in an effort to maintain payroll. But even so, a lot of workers left because they didn't have any jobs. And now, as the passenger traffic comes back, it is very difficult for airlines to find the workers that they need. Airline workers are highly skilled, so when they come back to work, you want them to get retrained again, especially pilots, and that takes time. So what we are seeing now is one of the perplexing problems hitting our entire economy, and that's the dearth of skilled workers, actually. There are about 10.5 million workers, there are about 10.5 million jobs that are vacant, and we just don't have enough workers. But having said that, I don't think there are very many people who are satisfied at all with the kind of jobs that the airline industries are doing. They are going to be incentivized by their own bottom line. Southwest Airlines is going to lose like $800 million. Now, that is going to be a real big incentive to that particular airline and to others who are losing money to improve their act. What I'm finding, and I'm going to say something that's a little bit controversial, which I'm sure you all love. Media will love that. But this whole issue about airlines is one that we have been facing for quite some time. Sure, there's bad weather, and bad weather is unpredictable. But just like banks have stress systems, stress alerts, there should be some way in which we have a stress alert system for the airline industry as well, so that when all of these issues about technology, about bad weather, about the lack of workers, and about how to run an airline more efficiently, that there be some kind of a system that can kind of give greater transparency to the consumer, the traveling public, and also allow the airlines to think more longer term about some of these issues. So I want to talk a little bit about the FAA a little bit. That it's, I don't want to filibuster, as they would say.
If you're making news, go for it.
Now the question can be, why did the FAA systems break down? And that's one that's been asked, obviously, many times. The FAA runs the air traffic control system. And that is a highly complex, capital-intensive, technology-driven system. And it's increasingly clear that the structure of the FAA is unsuited to the many demands on this agency. It is both a safety regulator and a provider of air traffic control services. So these two functions are not necessarily easily combined. And for decades, there's been so much discussion about how these functions combined in a single agency makes it tougher to carry out both missions, safety and operating an air traffic control system, to be totally effective. And we frankly do not see this combined function in a single agency in many other countries. So as mentioned, as a provider of services, it's responsible for a highly complex, capital-intensive, technology-driven system. And attempting to run this kind of system efficiently and reliably while ensuring that it keeps up with the demand is really difficult. While the system, FAA, is being shackled to the federal government's annual budget process, which is always fraught with uncertainties. Example, tomorrow there's going to be a discussion about the debt ceiling, and there could be a shutdown, in which case it's going to have an impact on the government budgets all over the whole government. So there was a serious proposal from Congress during the last administration to separate out the air traffic organization from the rest of the FAA, giving the air traffic control system greater independence, new independence, and the ability to finance itself through user fees, which it does already at this point. So in a structure like that, the FAA and the air traffic control system wouldn't have to compete with other agencies for adequate funding. And it wouldn't have to postpone much needed modernization initiatives because of a lack of resources. And it would have all the financing tools that it would need, like it can float bonds and borrow money from the public when necessary. But unfortunately, that proposal never came to a vote, and so we're still dealing with the consequences of a structure, a government bureaucratic structure that is no longer fitted for the purpose. And the outage that we saw last week is just more example of the need for a change at the FAA. So thank you for
This is
your
great.
patience
No,
on that.
I love news. You're calling for a privatization.
Not privatization, that's
Okay.
a bad word.
Okay, all right.
We're calling
There
for
you
we're calling for liberating the air traffic control system from the government bureaucratic shackles that is currently the FAA.
And you think the delays and the problems that existed last week and earlier, if this other structure would have been in place ahead of that, you think that would have forestalled it?
Well, we have examples of systems like this already operating. There's our northern neighbor, Nav Canada, runs its own separate, independent, nonprofit air traffic control system that it finances on its own, and then it also has a safety component with the government and regulating airlines. So those two are completely separate, and Nav Canada is a model along with Great Britain and others throughout the world.
Is there any other news you want to make today? This is great.
Well, this is, I mentioned
this is significant.
Yeah, I mentioned this as kind of, it's a bit unusual because I think most people who are so used to having air traffic control, controlled by the government, may be a little unrestful. And I think most people who are unfamiliar with the current situation would feel a little bit of that anxiety. But for people who have been in this field and who have observed the operations of air traffic control, as well as being in the government bureaucracy, the constant struggle for adequate resources for the air traffic control system requires new action. Right now you hear all about the monies that are going in the infrastructure proposal. A lot of that is going for capital expenditures, not necessarily to the air traffic control system. So for example, airports is receiving a big bulk of the financial resources, which I totally support. In fact, I'm really proud that in Kentucky, we housed the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky Airport. It really should be called the Northern Kentucky Airport. Candy McGraw is the airport executive, and she is doing an excellent job in running that airport. So I want to give her a big shout out. So airports do need financial investment. We want to have airports that are efficient, effective, modern. But we also need to make sure that the computer hardware and software that runs our air traffic control system is maintained and that it is adequately resourced. Given the lengthy and bureaucratic procurement process that marks any federal procurement project, the time that it takes is so long that by the time the air traffic control gets their computer system, it's already out of date, because it's very often 7 to 8 years, and if they're lucky. So it takes a great, and from your own experience on your desktop computers, how midnight you wake up and there's a new fix on your computer. So the technology is moving quickly, and we need to make sure that the air traffic control is adequate resourced, that they are liberated from the federal bureaucratic procurement rules, and that they are able to have the funds that they need to have the best system in the world.
To our questions, our Vice President of the Forum is Iris Wilbur-Glick, and she has a big stack of those questions. Iris.
Yes, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. Thank you, Joe. Secretary, staying with sort of the airline theme here, in your thoughts, how close are we to automated pilot commercial airlines?
It's already here. In fact, we have automated driving systems that is available to drive an airplane on its own, fly it on its own. And these automated driving systems are also available on trains, transit, ships. The problem is consumer acceptance. Would you get on a plane that has no pilot? Would you get on a plane, would you get on a train that has no conductor? I don't think so.
Would you?
Oh, actually, I'm okay. I've studied it for so long. But seriously, I think, Joe, you ask a very good question. And that is, people want safety in redundancy and in resilience. And so the same thing is also with automated vehicles. If you tell people that they're going to be in a driverless car, the anxiety level actually increases. 74% of Americans don't want to get into a driverless car. If you say it's going to be a self-driving car, the anxiety actually notches back a little bit, and only 71% don't want to get into a self-driving car. So I have said many times to the automated driving manufacturers, those who produce these self-driving cars, I said, your greatest constraint to growth is consumer acceptance. And the same with drones. Drones do a great job, but there's a lot of concerns about, drones flying in your second floor window and peeking inside as to what's happening. And so there's a lot of issues about not only safety, but security and privacy as well.
I've been in a few Ubers I would have traded for an autonomous vehicle at some point. Iris.
And actually, that's our next question regarding autonomous vehicles. How do we balance consumer acceptance and adoption, but also issues relating to privacy?
I think that's where we need to have greater discussion, and also that's the role of the regulators. And there is a public process, which we had engaged in as well, which means we have questions as to how an autonomous vehicle should look. So we just send out, it's not that we just send out, after much study and analysis, we send out questions that the federal government has. So for example, what do you think a car of the future would look like? You don't really need a wheelbase, right? Driving wheel. You don't need side view mirrors, because there's no driver inside that's going to look at those. You don't need a rear view mirror, because there's not going to be a driver in that seat. So potentially, these diagrams of the cars of the future would be like a living room. You can be in a living room with 4 chairs, and you can be watching Netflix or whatever you're talking on the telephone, and you don't have to have a parking lot or parking space, because you basically can say, program the car, I want you to be here at 10:30. The car can be half an hour away. So park the car someplace else, and then the car will come at 10:30 to pick you up. Think of what that will do to the configuration of architecture. What will it do to real estate? What becomes the space that used to be used for parking spaces or parking lots? So these are dramatic changes which will impact how our cities of the future will look.
If I could ask a question about EVs before we move on autonomous, are you concerned at all about how the U.S. is incentivizing electric vehicles without the infrastructure to support it?
The Inflation Reduction Act recently gave these large subsidies to American-made automobiles, EVs. But there's actually been a concern, and I'm not promoting it, I'm just saying it, is we're actually getting a lot of foreign companies who are having plants here. But they're producing EVs, but it's not counted. And so what do we do with that? But anyway, so EVs, that's another very interesting topic for a couple of reasons. One, it's like it's like a chicken and an egg issue. Our good friend Rich Kern is here, and I get, after all these years that I'm still here, I still get my idioms kind of mixed up. So it's a chicken and an egg. I was going to say whether it's an egg and chicken. No, it's a chicken and an egg issue. So range anxiety is real. And people who are interested in buying EVs are very concerned about how far they can travel. Now, we are seeing, again, increases in new technology. So Kentucky has 2 electric battery plants. We who are so strong in coal, we've got one in Glenview and one in Bowling Green. And they're going to provide 7,000 jobs for Kentuckians. In fact, the largest challenge I see with these 2 plants is finding enough workers. So there are charging stations. It is a growing but fragmented industry, and one will feed upon the other. But I think certainly this particular administration's emphasis on EVs and the $87 million that it offers for charging stations is going to impact that, advance that ball a bit. But they're still in the process of having the act pass and then coming out with proposals, and so that would take some time.
As a follow-up to that, can you speak to concerns relating to the electric grid capacity to serve EVs?
Yeah. Guess what? Coal keeps the lights on. We forget that. So as we talk about all this green technology, coal keeps the lights on. So as we have all this new electric vehicles being talked about, it is going to present a tremendous pressure and stress on an already stressed electric grid, and that's an issue. But let me mention one other issue about electric vehicles, and that is, we forget who funds the highways? You do. You drive your vehicles, and you pay for gasoline, and a certain percentage of that gasoline price goes to the Highway Trust Fund, monies that is used to help build new roads and bridges and transit. Did you know that of the Highway Trust Fund, 25% of it goes to transit? Now think about who gets transit systems. Okay, so we're talking about rural versus urban. And this is a conflict, this is a tension between our transportation systems. So 25% of that goes to transit. Only 75% remains for highways. So as we have EVs increase in frequency and usage, how are they going to pay for the maintenance and repairs of these roads? They're not going to use gasoline, so they're not going to contribute to the gas tax, so they're not going to contribute to the Highway Trust Fund. And they're going to use these roads for free? They got to put up their fair share. So the next policy question is, what is fair share, and how will EVs pay for the maintenance and repairs of our highway system?
So what is fair share, and how will highways pay for it?
These are emerging policy questions.
That's true.
And so these have to be discussed. We're a democracy, and we're going to have to discuss it.
Switching gears, we've received several questions about the Brent Spence Bridge, its recent federal funding opportunities, the grant process. So, Secretary, can you just kind of speak to how we got here, where the BSB is going, and then the ability to pay for bridges in the future in the context of what Louisville experienced with the Bridges Project here?
Well, we all know about the Brent Spence Bridge. I think most of us have gone through it. So I'm just delighted that it finally is getting built. And it came through because of the infrastructure bill. We just didn't have the money. I mean, it's getting free money, $1.6 billion to fix this bridge, and the cost now is $3.6 billion, just in just a very short time. It's gone from 2.8 to 3.6, but it's a much needed correlator in our transportation system. I want to throw a big shout out to my roommate, who, President Biden is to be credited for signing the infrastructure bill, but Mitch has been working on this for 20 years. And it would never have come about if it were not for his steadfast and just consistent work on finding the resources. Before this bill, the only way to fund that bridge was through tolls. And a lot of Northern Kentuckians did not want that to happen, and thus was the holdup. I might also add that the former president was never very good at forging bipartisan efforts to ensure legislative successes.
If I could follow up, I think part of the context of Iris, or the question that Iris read, is we have tolled bridges in Louisville. That was the financing scheme that was necessary at that time, and Louisville was pretty much told, these are never going to be built unless you agree to tolls. Will that ever be reversible?
That's not something that I can answer. I think that that's where the inequity of all of this comes in.
The timing, of course, of the investment.
And so you're the good guy, and you do what's told, and you're the good child, and then this is what happens. So, but the overall, we're just delighted that the bridge has been built. It's much needed, and again, I just know how hard and long Mitch had worked on this. And I wish it happened during my tenure. I would have loved to give this gift to my home Commonwealth.
Iris?
We also received several questions about establishing high-speed train and rail systems in the region. Can you speak to that?
High-speed rail is really an idea that's been around since the 1970s. And right now, there's a high-speed rail that looks promising between Houston, Texas, and Dallas, Texas. There's also one from Nevada, Las Vegas to California, Vacaville. And there's one other that I can't seem to remember at this point. But, our country doesn't really have a love affair with rail. Even though with the congestion in air travel, let's say between Dallas and Houston, high-speed rail can certainly be an alternative. But the only profitable passenger rail in the country is between Washington and Boston, Amtrak. Any place else Amtrak operates, you are subsidizing. So long-distance passenger rail, from Chicago to California, for example, on average, the per subsidy head is about $240. So nowhere else is passenger rail, really compensatory, and basically it requires a federal subsidy of some kind. So we just don't have, we love our cars, and people love driving, and it's hard to get them into passenger rail. And for example, transit systems, there's not one transit system that is profitable, that operates in the green, black. And so transit systems are all subsidized by the federal and state government.
What will be the role of the federal government moving forward regarding setting standards and preempting states regarding sort of innovation? And so we see this tug of war, particularly legislation in certain states regarding drones getting ahead of the federal government. Where do you see this going? What role of the federal government moving forward? Will they intervene and set some standards?
That's why what the Department of Transportation did in 2017, 2018, 2020 on integrating a policy framework on regulating drones was so essential. We do not want a state-by-state patchwork of regulatory regimes that impede the growth in this sector. Imagine if every state had their own drone regulations. If you were flying from California to Arizona, would you have to stop at the border and figure out how to go into Arizona or some other state. And so I think the federal government needs to work together with the state governments. And not all of them are active. They're leaders. North Dakota, believe it or not, is doing an excellent job in drone technology. They've decided that they want economic development. And what is a good industry for them to focus on? With the leadership of the 2 senators and the governor and the private sector and the universities, they have made North Dakota a very popular and appealing testing ground for drones. It's got lots and lots of open space. During the summertime, it can get quite hot. During the wintertime, if you're near Minot, North Dakota, it is negative 40 degrees. And so that range of temperature is ideal for testing automated vehicles, for testing drones, to ensure that safety remains number one.
If I could, I have a timeline question for you, because we appreciate the futuristic look of this, but you're also suggesting to us that it's not so futuristic as what some of us might think. So like autonomous vehicles, when do you see autonomous vehicles as being commonplace?
We're seeing a lot of this already. For example, if you have a Tesla and you drive in California, the Tesla is a level 2. There are 5 levels. So Tesla is a level 2, and it basically hugs the white lines on the highway, and it can drive itself. But the regulators do not allow the car to be without a driver, remember, because the regulators on. And then also, the driver in the car, even if they put on the automated driving system, has to tap the wheelbase every 10 minutes or so to make sure that he's not falling asleep, that the person is alert and at the wheel. So I think we're going to see level 3, probably level 4, level 5, which is totally autonomous, last mile driven. That's going to be difficult because we're basically replicating the human brain. And we as humans know that if we see, an inanimate object, a ball come out between 2 parked cars, we would slow down because there might be a little child there. Or but if you're an automated vehicle, the software system has to be so complicated as to be able to differentiate between, maybe some plastic foil that's blown into the path of the car versus a ball versus something else even more precious. So that is going to be a difficult time. But we're seeing all sorts of automated features now in your cars anyway. When you back up, you're seeing the mirror, there's all sorts of safety alerts. All of that is integrated together increasingly in an automated driving system.
So staying on the automation topic, what other technologies can you speak to that could be viewed as possible improvements to public ground transportation?
I'm really proud of the fact that during my tenure as Secretary of Transportation, we fully implemented positive train control. This is a system, a software and hardware system within the train itself and along the path of the tracks that basically monitors the speed of the train. There's been a great deal of concern about how to reduce accidents. And one of the ways is if a driver, a conductor inside the train is incapacitated, that there be outside kind of like monitoring systems to ensure that if a train is going too fast, that it would be automatically reduced in speed. So as we see the city of the future, we're going to see more and more like that as well. We're going to see vehicles to vehicles communicating with one another. So that a vehicle, once they're autonomous, they will be able to know, hey, I better not get next to this other car because it's veering toward me, I'm going to move to the left. So the vehicles to vehicles will talk to one another. But that will take transition time because you will have old cars that don't know how to speak with new cars. And so that is a transition. We are also going to have city infrastructures of the city in which buildings will have the ability to talk to cars, cars would talk to inanimate objects, and so it would be like a city of the future, like the Jetsons. But all of that, and that's obviously way in the future, but the ability for these systems to talk to one another. I think I missed the point of the question here. What was?
Technologies.
Yep.
Yep.
So we're seeing like technology in the cities in the future as well. And it's not Verizon, AT&T, they are all experimenting with 5G, with infrastructure communications. If you ever were to visit Verizon, AT&T, go and see their showroom. Sometimes they have aspects of what they're doing in inner urban scenarios and how they will have Wi-Fi and 5G have communications with inanimate objects to regulate the traffic.
Switching gears, given your past connections with Baltic countries and the Ukraine, one attendee asked your thoughts on the current war in Ukraine and the situation in Ukraine.
It is heartbreaking. It is beyond belief that in this century there would be such malicious, deliberate intrusion on another country's sovereignty. The president of Ukraine is President Zelensky. He was an actor. I first actually watched him when he starred in his own television series, and it was called, now I forgot, now that I'm, it's something called Party of the yeah, it was, I'm so embarrassed because I tell this all the time. But he basically, it's a party of the people. And he basically, after the series became incredibly successful, started a new party using the name from his television station and won the election to be president with 77% of the vote. And so at first, I don't think he was taken seriously. But my goodness, what courage, fortitude, and inspiration he has offered the rest of the world. And who would have thought, the Russians certainly did not, that Ukraine would last for so long. So it is with real tribute and just admiration and support that I send to the Ukrainian people, because I've been in Ukraine. I saw the rise of democracy, the fall of the former Soviet Union, and the tremendous country that this 52 million people have built. And we wish them well. And America is certainly behind them in every way. And I'm going to send another shout out to my husband, Leader McConnell, who has been absolutely pivotal in ensuring that the Ukrainian people have the ability to fight for their own country. And today's newspaper, and in the front pages of today's newspaper is another heartbreaking photograph of the Russian strikes against an apartment building in which a number of children, adults, and other civilians were killed.
Iris.
During your tenure as Secretary of Transportation, what kept you up at night?
Everything. You see how relaxed I am now? You know, as you know, I'm an immigrant to this country, and I believe in public service, and I'm so grateful to be able to be here in America, to live in a peaceful country, and my parents are so adorable. People used to go and take country roads, right? No, my parents loved to take the highway, and they would say to their children, "Look at this country. Look at these roads. They're all so uniform and straight and wide, and they're paved." So they took real delight in being Americans and, you know, in just being productive citizens. So my sisters and I grew up imbued with a sense of possibilities in this country. And we are just so grateful to have the opportunity to be here. So in terms of your question again, will you repeat that?
Sure. What kept you up at night during your tenure as Secretary of Transportation?
So, I think one of the things that you just, at least for me, I worried about everything. And that made me work harder. That motivated me to ensure that I thought about contingency planning and that I thought of what possibly can go wrong and that we plan for the future. So circling back to the original question about what can we do with air travel, I think we can plan more. I think that we can be more transparent. And I think I think the federal government can be more prepared in anticipating what can possibly go wrong and to resolve these issues before they appear.
Final question. What brings you hope? What are you looking forward to in the future?
We're Americans. That is hope in itself. We are criticized, yes, throughout the world. But if you ever dangled the prospect of American citizenship before even the harshest of critics, they'll grab it and they'll come. And I'll tell you a real life story. The former Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, was in Guantanamo Bay, and he was not in Guantanamo Bay, I'm so sorry, in the Middle East. And he happened to have talked to someone who was jailed for bombing U.S. troops with IUDs and other terrorist acts. And so Jim Mattis, Secretary Mattis, was trying to figure out what motivates you. Why do you do these things to American soldiers who are trying to bring peace and help you? And he says, I don't like people occupying my country, which is understandable. And after a long conversation, just before Secretary Mattis leaves, this Arab person, terrorist, tugged at Secretary Mattis and said, before you go, if I tell you something, do you think I'm going to get an American citizenship? That, in the starkest terms, tells you how we are the hope and the beacon of opportunity to so many millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world. And part of our strength is that we are able to criticize ourselves. And part of our strength also is that we self-correct quickly and that we're able, to reform for the future. And so, once again, I say we're just so lucky to be Americans, to be in a country that offers such incredible opportunities to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine, Chao. Appreciate it. On behalf of our entire Louisville Forum, again, thank you to Secretary Chao. We're going to point out our next meeting is our annual dinner, Wednesday, February 8th. Our keynote speaker is our new mayor, Craig Greenberg. Also, the recipient of the 2023 Fleur de Lis Award will be the Novak family, David and Wendy Novak, and their daughter, Ashley Novak Butler, for their lifetime of leadership in our community and beyond. Thank you, and good afternoon.